The more scared you are of having a conversation, the more critical it is that you have it. If you struggle to have critical conversations, this book is a must read. It'll help you not just manage conflicts, but it'll help you communicate effectively in moments that matter the most, whether it's personal or professional. And this book really got me at a good time because I had a really hard time with difficult conversations. I used to have a lot of fights with my family. I used to keep fighting with friends. I used to not be able to get along with colleagues. And I realized that in some instances, yes, the other person was wrong, but the book beautifully explains how it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. Effective dialogue is not about that in particular. It's about creating space for an open conversation to help resolve a conflict regardless of right or wrong. And I've read this book multiple times. So I've condensed down the most effective principles that I have used in my life, which have really made a big difference to my relationships and conflict management. And there are 6 total tools which I would like to share with you from Crucial Conversations. By the way, if you're new here, my name is Radeep. And if you like communications content, hit subscribe as we release videos like this all the time. And if you want to take your communications journey to the next level, you can book a free consultation call with us by clicking the link below, and we can see if we can help you out. So the fundamental point of this book is that we feel that there's a difference between telling the truth and maintaining a relationship. But the book goes on to say that you can be 100% honest while being 100% respectful. So we're going to discuss 6 tools from the book Crucial Conversations to understand how we can find that important middle ground. The first aspect is to figure out if we are having the right conversation, because many times we might not be having the right conversation. The author says that there are 3 ways to figure out if you're in the wrong conversation. The first is if your emotions escalate, then you're not having the right objective conversation, and hence you can't have a productive dialogue. The second aspect is if you walk away feeling skeptical, like, hey, y'all did speak, but you still feel that there's no real solution here, and I'm still feeling a little bad about the whole situation. And the third aspect is a deja vu dialogue, which means if you feel that this conversation is happening again and again and again, then there's probably no real flow to it. So how can we figure out how to have the right conversation? There are a lot of principles that are put over here, but my favorite one is something called as the CPR method. It stands for content, pattern, and relationships. The author says that when you're having a conversation, understand if you're talking about the content, is it a pattern, or the larger relationship. So for example, let's say if somebody is coming in late and you want to have a conversation with them about being a little more punctual. Now, what we need to ask ourselves is, have they just come late once or twice? Which means it's a conversation about the content. But if they're coming in late repeatedly, then it's a conversation about a pattern. And if them coming late is affecting the overall relationship that you're having with them because they're doing it consistently, then the conversation is not just about them coming late, but about respecting your time as a whole. And each of these 3 aspects will have different approaches and different areas of sensitivity, which we need to think about before diving into the crucial conversation. And the clarity that CPR provides to us can help us to salvage even tough conversations. And many times what can happen is we're talking about the larger relationship, but people are constantly going back to a content-based conversation. So having this clarity helps us to draw people back to the real matter at hand. The second tool is to refuse the fool's choice. We've spoken earlier about making the choice between keeping a relationship or telling the truth. And when we make that choice, we're making the fool's choice. And the author says that we can find some middle ground over there as well. A great way to do that is to use the AND method. The AND method helps us to propose a question that allows us to solve for a problem while maintaining the relationship. And it happens by asking ourselves certain questions. You first start by asking, what do you really want? So for example, if you're in a community discussion for children and someone is dominating a particular dialogue, the author gives a great example. So start by clarifying what you want. What I want is to engage in community discussion about a curriculum that impacts all our kids. I want a group of parents to be able to share candidly and listen to one another. We then need to ask ourselves, what do we really don't want? What I don't want is to have people shut down because one person is dominating the discussion. I also don't want our honest difference to lead to damaged relationships. And finally, propose the question which allows you to not make the fool's choice by simply saying, how can we have a candid conversation and strengthen our relationships? So we use the and. How do we have a candid conversation and strengthen our relationship? It shows that our intent is very clear and we're not trying to make the fool's choice. Point number 3 is my favorite point. In fact, an entire video can be dedicated to this itself, which is to master your stories. The author says that when we are told something, we automatically feel a certain way and hence we act in a certain manner. But there's a question, a very critical question that the author asks is, why do we tend to feel a certain way when we are told something? And that's because between what we heard and between what we felt, there is a story that we've told ourselves that adds to that feeling and hence makes us act in a certain way. I'll give you an example from the book of a girl called Maria, who's a copywriter and has a colleague called Lewis. Now, the story goes wherein Maria and Lewis have worked on a presentation, they have to present it to their boss, and when the presentation is about to begin, as Maria pauses to take a breath, Lewis just takes over and completes the entire presentation, answers all the questions, presents all the slides. And when the boss looks over to Maria for her opinion, she now has nothing to say. This makes her feel very frustrated. And she starts to behave very passive aggressively with Lewis by throwing snarky and sarcastic comments, giving the silent treatment, so on and so forth. So when Lewis takes over the presentation, Maria hears that and immediately tells herself a story, which is along the lines of, he doesn't trust my ability to communicate. He thinks they're more likely to listen to a man and he's trying to hog the spotlight for himself, which basically translates to he's a sexist and power hungry person. So that's the story she tells herself. So automatically she feels a certain way and acts accordingly. But the book teaches us to dig deeper into these stories because they're so impactful to the way we have conversations. And one of the best ways to do that is to take a step back, analyze the stories, and go back to the facts itself. In this particular example, the fact was not that Lewis is sexist or wants to hog the spotlight. The fact is that Lewis simply presented all the slides, answered all the questions, and Maria didn't do anything to interrupt or stop it. Now, once we have that as our story, which is a lot more objective, our feelings automatically become a little more driven by curiosity. And we tend to ask ourselves the question that why would somebody who's generally reasonable act in this particular manner? And that opens up our mind to having a more open dialogue and hence a crucial conversation. Because we might find that the reason why somebody behaved this way has nothing to do with you. Lewis could have been given feedback from that same boss who they presented to that, hey, Lewis, you don't tend to talk much. You need to speak up more in meetings. You need to present more and showcase your communication skills. And if that is true, it has nothing to do with Maria. It has nothing to do with him being sexist or hogging the spotlight. But we can never understand the truth if we're not objective about our stories. And that's point number 3, which is to master our internal narratives so that we can feel and act in more objective ways. Number 4 is to make it safe. How do we make a person feel safe to have a crucial conversation? And we can make it safe by using a very simple technique that's given in the book called contrasting. It means we clearly and simply state out what our intent is and what our intent is not. An example of this is, I wanted to talk about how we're managing our finances. I don't want you to think that I don't appreciate the time you've taken to keep our checking account balance and up to date. I do appreciate it, and I know I certainly couldn't have done nearly as well. I do, however, have some concerns with how we're using the new online banking system. So we're not attacking anybody. We're showing what we appreciate. We're showing our intent there. And we're showing our intent in what we would like to work and talk and improve upon. That's contrasting. It helps to create a much safer environment to then have a more open dialogue. Number 5 is improve our listening skills. Very foundational, but something that we're not very good at. There are 4 things you can do to improve your listening. You start by asking. Simply start by expressing interest in the other person's views. The second thing you can do is to mirror. You can increase the safety of a conversation by acknowledging the other person's emotions and their side of the story. The third is to paraphrase. After they're done speaking, paraphrase what you understood, repeat it back to them so that y'all both know that y'all are on the same page. And the fourth aspect is priming. If somebody's closed off and they're not really talking too much, they're not opening up, you can take your best shot at what they might be feeling, state that to them in a respectful manner, and then have the ball rolling from there on. And finally, the 6th point is to retake your pen, which means if you yourself see that your emotions are rising and you want to collect yourself back, you can use these particular techniques. 4 aspects. The first is to collect yourself by breathing in deeply. You can also name and acknowledge the emotion you're feeling at the time so that you can separate yourself from the emotion. The second aspect is understanding, which goes back to listening. We need to be curious, ask questions, and really understand where and why the other person is coming from the place that they're coming from. The third is to recover. If you still feel that this is not working out, take a step back, take some time off, and then come back to the conversation when the emotions are a lot more settled. And the 4th aspect is to engage, which I love. I'm going to read the quote directly from the book. It says, look for truth rather than defensively poking holes in the feedback. And if we approach the conversations to find the truth, we are not looking for conflict. We're just looking to get to the bottom of a particular matter. If you utilize these 6 tools, your ability to have crucial conversations significantly improves. Now, earlier in the video, we did talk about listening skills. And that is in my opinion, the easiest thing for you to take away from this video. In fact, I would recommend you go deeper into active listening so that you can not only improve your communication, but your relationships as well. We've created a deeper guide into active listening. You can check out that whole video right here.